If you're between 15 and 20 years old and you feel stuck between wanting financial freedom but not knowing where to start, I'm about to give you the 5 mindset shift that'll put you ahead of 99% of people your age, no matter your situation, and you can start by applying them to your life today. The first thing that you need to do is reframe your disadvantages, because they are actually your superpower, and I'll tell you why in just a second. You know that you want to get to really high success levels, let's just say Mr. Beast, Iman Gaji, Alex Hormozi, etc., but you have no connections, you have no money, you have no following, and you might not even have a car, and that makes you feel stuck. However, what you're not seeing right now is that you're not tied to anything, not even a family business, which can seem like a huge advantage, but it can also be a golden prison. Let me explain this with a story that'll blow your mind. Let's say that you have a very successful father that owns an accounting firm. This would be the family business that you would likely inherit after he passed away. Guaranteed income, established client base, and everything handed to you on a silver platter. You would think that that is your dream life. But what if you wanted to be a photographer? Or what if you wanted to be a chef or an influencer? All of a sudden, your disadvantage of starting from scratch feels more like freedom from expectations. You get to pick what you want to be and how you want to build your life, because you're starting with no expectations from anybody. There's no family pressure saying you need to take over the business. There's no predetermined path that everybody's expecting you to follow. While your friends with very successful parents are locked into following a very specific path, you have complete creative freedom over your life. This means that you can pivot, you can experiment, you can fail, and you can try again without disappointing anyone or letting any family legacy down. Now, this freedom is worth way more than any inheritance, because it allows you to actually discover what you're passionate about and build something that is authentically yours. Which brings me to point number 2, which is you have no bills right now. And since you have no bills, nobody's depending on you right now. That means that you get to go all in risk-free, because there's not a child that needs to be fed, or you don't have a huge house payment or a car payment to make at the beginning of next month. If your plans fail, the worst case scenario is starting where you are right now, plus having all of the knowledge that you got while going after your dreams. Now, let me tell you exactly how I leveraged this to my advantage. In my case, when I was young, all of my money would go into buying new gear that would help me create a better product. I was not tied to anything. Therefore, I could afford to buy a new camera with the little money that I would earn. I could afford to make payments on an old iMac, and I could afford to pay software like Photoshop or Premiere Pro, because I wasn't wasting it in dumb things. I was simply not interested in buying a new car. I was not interested in moving out and renting a house, because that would mean that I would be a slave to those monthly payments. Now, here's what most people your age don't understand. Every monthly payment that you take on is a chain that limits your ability to take risks. When you have a $400 car payment, an $800 rent payment, and a $200 phone bill, you can't afford to quit your job to pursue your dreams. You can't afford to invest in yourself, because you're trapped in the cycle of working just to pay the bills. But right now, you have the ultimate advantage, and you'll never have it again. You can quite literally live off of ramen noodles and still invest every extra dollar into your future. You can work 16 hours a day because you don't have a family that depends on you waiting for you at home. You can take calculated risks that people with responsibilities simply cannot. And most of all, you have the energy of a young kid that nobody else has. So in my case, when I was in your shoes, I was simply focused on developing my skills as much as possible. But I understood something that most people don't even think about. I understood that I needed to develop my skills as much as possible, because they would eventually develop into a business. I was quite literally acting like a visionary. You see, when I was 17, I loved photography, and I would look at other photographers on YouTube like Peter McKinnon or Maddie or Sorella Moore, and I wished that I could take photos like them. I was obsessed with everything that there is to learn about making photos. But at the very beginning of my path, before I even started earning a little bit of money, I couldn't even afford a camera yet. However, that didn't stop me. I started taking photos with an old iPhone 6, and it was so broken that you could actually hear the shutter when you opened the camera app. But that was fine with me, because here's the thing that most people miss. They think that they need the perfect equipment to start learning. They think that they need the latest MacBook or the most expensive camera or the professional software. But that, my friend, is complete bullshit. I learned all the basic skills that there is to learn because I was determined. I was passionate. I studied composition, lighting, editing techniques, color theory, all with a phone that was quite literally falling apart. Now here's where it gets interesting. Fast forward a year later, by total coincidence, I met a guy who needed help taking photos for his real estate clients. And just like that, I landed my first paid gig taking photos. But it actually wasn't complete chance like most people would think. It actually happened because I was passionate about getting better. So naturally, I would end up meeting people in the same field with similar interests. Some of them were already ahead of me, but I saw that as a blessing. When most people feel insecure that others are ahead of them, most people, when they see somebody more successful, they think, well, I'll never be that good, or they're so much better than me, so I shouldn't hang out with them. I flipped the script. Every person ahead of me became a potential mentor, a source of inspiration, or even a roadmap of where I could go. The point I'm trying to make is this: I followed my passion until I was skilled enough to offer the skill to somebody else. Because if you have a skill that someone is willing to give you money for, my friend, congratulations, you have a business. And it doesn't even matter that the other person already knows how to do what you're offering them. Sometimes if you can do it for them, that in itself is very valuable because you're selling a skill and you're saving somebody else time. Think about it. The real estate agent could have probably learned photography. He could have probably figured out how to edit photos, how to create the composition, and how to make the marketing materials. But his time was literally worth 100 times more selling houses. My time was probably worth $20 an hour taking photos. So it was a win-win. Now, speaking of time, most people overestimate the time that it takes to get good enough at a skill to offer it as a service. And they think that they need to know absolutely everything that there is to learn about that subject. But that is a complete lie, and you must get rid of that belief as soon as you can. Like Danko says, you can learn any skill and get good enough to sell it in just 2 weeks. And you don't need to be a world-class expert at it either. Now, let me break this down with a concrete example. Let's say that you want to offer advertising. You can look for free courses on YouTube for lead generation. And side note, Jordan Platten has some incredible videos on this. Now, you can decide to offer Facebook ads only, which means that you only need to learn a little bit about running ads on their platform. Of course, some basic graphic design and some basic copywriting, which nowadays I hear that you can start generating with Canva and ChatGPT. Now, here's the reality. You don't need to be the world's best Facebook ads expert. You just need to be better than the business owner that has zero time to learn it for themselves. You just need to know more than the restaurant owner who's too busy running his restaurant to figure out how to target local customers on Facebook. The bar is way lower than you think. Most small business owners are drowning on their day-to-day operations. So if you come in and handle their social media or run their ads or even just create their content, you're actually solving a massive problem for them. But most people never even get to this point. They think everybody else is doing it, so then why would I? Or they think it's already way too saturated. But those excuses are lies that they tell themselves to justify their comfort zone. And you are better than that. Now, here's what's actually happening. They're scared. They're scared of not being perfect, or they're scared of charging money for something that they just learned. They're scared of being found out as not being an expert. But here's the secret. Nobody expects you to be perfect. They expect you to solve their problems better than they could have solved it themselves. Now, the last point I'm gonna give you is something that I just realized very recently, and that is hustle culture is a huge scam, at least the way that it is portrayed on social media. Here's what nobody talks about when they're screaming, work harder or grind 24/7. They're completely missing the most important part of the equation. Hustle culture is obsessed with how much you work, but it never actually talks about what you work on. And what you work on is literally 1,000 times more important than the amount of hours that you put in. You could work 80 hours a week for 10 years building somebody else's dream, grinding at a job that you hate, and you end up burned out, resentful, and probably not that much richer than when you started. Or you could work 80 hours a week on something that you're genuinely passionate about, something that energizes you instead of draining you, and those same 10 years could have completely transformed your life. The difference isn't in the hours, is what those hours are spent on. Look, did I work a ton to develop my skills to get to where I'm at today? Of course I did. Did I put ungodly amounts of hours into my craft throughout the years? Yes, I did. And I even lost some friends along the way because I was too busy working. But here's the thing that hustle culture won't tell you. Working actually felt good. Working actually felt natural because of one very simple thing. I had passion, therefore it gave me purpose. So when I was editing photos at 2 a.m., I wasn't grinding, I was actually having fun. And when I was learning new techniques on YouTube for hours on end, I wasn't actually forcing myself to do it. I was genuinely curious and excited for it. And that is the difference between sustainable success and burnout. When you love what you do, working 12 hours a day doesn't actually feel like work. It feels like play. It feels like you're building something meaningful. Now, here's what really pisses me off about hustle culture is that it tricks young people into thinking that suffering equals success. That if you're not miserable, you're not working hard enough. Look, I know people that follow this advice and they grinded for years on a business that they hated, skills that they didn't care about, all because somebody told them to work harder and the money will come. And you know what? Some of them did make money, really good money even. But when I talk to them now, they all say the same thing. The money wasn't worth it. They're burnt out, they're depressed, and they've built something that they don't even want to work on when they wake up anymore. But here's a reality that young people don't want to face. You're gonna be working on this for the next 20 to 30 years, not a few months and bounce. This isn't a sprint where you can just push through the pain for a few months and then retire. So if you choose something that you hate just because it makes money, you're signing up for decades of misery. And trust me, no amount of money is worth spending 30 years of your life doing something that drains your soul. This is why it's so important to not follow what hustle culture is saying, which is work so hard at something until you burn out, regardless of whether you actually care about it or not. Because the reality is this: if you work hard at the thing that you love, you will naturally want to work even more, and you will actually feel fulfilled, which means that you outwork your competition from the very beginning. In my case, I now run a social media marketing and advertising agency that makes upwards of 15K a month, and I started with a broken iPhone 6. But here's the thing: I didn't start with the goal of reaching those 10, 20K months. I started with the goal of getting better at something that I actually loved. The money simply followed naturally because I became genuinely good at solving problems for people. And because I love what I do, I can sustain this for the next 30 years if I want to. I can keep getting better, keep innovating, and keep growing because it doesn't actually feel like work. So if you don't know where your passion is right now, that is okay. You are young, but it is up to you to try as many things as possible until you figure out what it is that you like. Don't just pick something because it's profitable or because a guru told you that it's a good opportunity. Pick something that actually makes you curious. Pick something that you could see yourself doing for decades, not just until you make your first million. And then simply pursue that as much as humanly possible. Don't wait for permission. Don't wait until you feel ready. Don't wait until the perfect moment or you have the perfect equipment. Start literally today. Start with what you have. Start with that broken phone. Start with the old laptop. Start with the free software. Start with your curiosity and your willingness to learn. Because while everybody else your age is chasing that quick money and burning themselves out, you'll be building something sustainable that actually energizes you instead of draining you. Something that you can actually be proud of for the rest of your life. So like the wise man say, the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is today. And trust me, your future self will absolutely thank you for starting today and choosing something that you actually love. Now, if you like what you heard today, go ahead and click subscribe to see more of my videos, and I'll see you then.